Hi folks, I'm International Master John Watson, and this is Ask the Master on ICC TV. The main idea of this show is to provide you players with and fans with a forum to ask questions about chess and the chess world. You can send these questions in advance, or if you're tuning in live right now to YouTube, ICC, you can, I'm getting feedback. Maybe people on the chat should tell me if you're getting feedback here. Oh, for crying out loud. Let me just check this for a second, folks. Technical difficulties, although you'll notice the picture is better this week. So I don't see anything on the chat yet. Could someone, if someone's listening on the chat, could you please tell me whether you're getting my voice doubled up here? No, it sounds okay actually. Okay, I think we're fine here. Yeah. Okay, I guess I'll just continue because I don't hear myself anymore. I was getting a feedback of my own voice very loudly. All right, I generally give questions priority if they've been sent during the week, because that way I can make my answers more precise. You can make longer and more precise questions than you can in the chat, but the chat's a lot of fun, and I will usually get to everything on the chat window. So there are three ways to submit questions in advance. I'm getting a little feedback again. Does anybody hear that? I actually don't know what I can do about that because let me just check something. This sound is muted. No, it isn't. That's what happened. My previously muted sound is now muted again, I think. No, I'm listening to my own broadcast. That's what's going on. Now I understand. I will be out of this problem in just a second. Aha. I was listening to my own broadcast. That was it, with a delay, which makes it even weirder. Aha! Okay, finally, back to the point. There are three ways to submit questions in advance, and thank you, by the way, for telling me. It's best to submit them up to the day before the show, but I will also check in the morning. So the first and the best way to send a question is to send it to my email account, askimwatson@chessclub.com. That's ASKIMWATSON, one word, at chessclub.com, and I'll get to that right away. We also have a Twitter channel, hashtag AskIamWatson, which it seems to me nobody's using, but you can send a tweet there. You can, if you have a twit handy, you can send a message to my ICC handle, also John L. Watson. That's just John L as in Lion Watson, one word, which is another way to reach me. And the alternative, of course, is to ask a question right now live in the chat, which is something you can do in the right channel in front of you there. Okay, so you can ask about anything related to chess. A few areas I have expertise in are chess openings, since I've played and written about them for many, many years, decades. Chess strategy, leading players, chess history, chess books, chess videos. I write books. I'm an author. And I review books too, so books are fun. We haven't asked much about books, but maybe in the future we will, and I'll try to mention things when they come up. Okay, so let's just get started, and I wanted to first talk about a few things that I had talked about before, but I'd mentioned before but really hadn't finished, or I told people I'd come back next week and ask you and tell you more about. And one of them was this funny thing, the Arias Gambit. And there's a book by Daniel Lowinger, who just came out, called Opening Originals. And I knew he had mentioned this line, but I hadn't looked at it recently. So I decided to look at what he said. I don't know if you guys remember this, but we had this in a previous show, and I promised to come back and say something intelligent about it. This amazing move is called the Arias Gambit. It gives up a pawn, obviously, if you just take it. And so I looked up a little bit from his book about it. It's actually kind of fascinating. The first game he gives, white actually doesn't take the pawn. He just develops, which seems really common sense, but it allows black to get an attack going on that side of the board. And you'll notice that if white takes this, black can take here, really breaking up the center, attacking that pawn. And that's usually not desirable to lose that d4 pawn. So white in this example just castled, getting way ahead in development, by the way. But black starts counterattacking the center. Now he's got a nice attack on that pawn chain. So that's probably, this is probably okay for black, I think, this position. And let me just show you what happens here. Well, I give a sample line here because I think white played kind of badly. I think that's the critical line because that way you can afford to give up this pawn and you're still holding this one. And black would play here, threatening to take, and then take again, obviously. So white plays knight here. And now I think maybe the easiest way to play this is just to develop a piece. You could play here, stopping f5, but f5 isn't really a threat yet. The reason f5 is not a threat yet is because you can take once and then take here, and this pawn will be pinned to the king. So I was thinking about just making this move, and if king over, which is the logical move, to maybe think about f5, it may still be a little bit early. And actually this was a game, excuse me. Now I've actually managed to run into a game here. Is that right? No, I haven't. Excuse me, this wasn't a game. Okay. And then I was just going to play here because I don't think f5 is really a dangerous move. For example, here, f5, and I think you just take that. Maybe take some of the pawns first on the queen side. Maybe here. Clear this out a little and play here. And it's true, white will probably get his pawn back or have some sort of attack, but it's not very serious. I think black's doing perfectly well. He's totally solid here. He has no real weaknesses if he castles kingside, and temporarily he's a pawn up. So that's that line. But more interesting, I think, is actually taking the pawn. So let's take a look at that. After b5 is to take this pawn, and then black's whole point is to play this move, getting pressure this way, and also attacking the bishop. So a very natural answer is this. I think I mentioned this, just kind of making it up from my very weak memory, which defends the bishop and defends this pawn. So that makes sense. And a good answer is just the nice slow capture, because if he plays here, he's giving up all of the light squares, and that's almost always worth a pawn. Also, I think it's hard to defend this at this point. So I guess you could play queen b3, but the point is the light squares are going. And the center's weak, so this is not at all desirable. So white plays back, and this has happened in some games. And black takes. Now queen takes, bishop c5 is going to be really good. So pawn takes, holding the center together. Knight here. The idea of knight takes. And white plays here. And black just plays here. Now there's another game where black really went crazy and played here right away. It's sort of a famous idea in the Tarrasch. Increasingly in the modern Tarrasch people play that. The only problem is that after taking here, you notice you can't take with the queen because the knight's hanging. So you have to take this way. And here, white's going to win one of those pawns back, at least in most positions. So this is really a mess. I think the best line is here, check, and here. And then you're going to get this back because you're threatening h6 winning the bishop. It's a total mess. The computer seems to think it's just a little tiny bit better for white. I'm not even sure about that. So this would be fun. g5 seems playable. It's a little easier to play bishop e7, and then, which is what happened in another game, and then g5. And the idea of g5, of course, is chase the knight away and maybe just take this, although it leaves this pawn hanging here. So let's take a quick look at what happened in the game. What happened in the game was this. He's not afraid of this because he's going to get back this pawn. So black plays here with the idea of playing g4 and then just taking this pawn. And white has not much to do. All of a sudden there's trouble for white. How to respond to all this. He tries this, and then the idea is that black can't take this way because of queen takes here. And I'm sorry, first of all, white makes a move, sorry. And this is also bad, and that's why he played king h1, is because of this. And it turns out there's some complications here, but in the end black stands well there. But if black just protects the knight, which is what he did, now he's threatening to take with either piece, and or at least with the queen, excuse me. And so white played rook d1, very natural, and black played here, threatening this pawn 3 times. And then after that, white is losing the d pawn. Now, because black's position is kind of loose, white probably has compensation for that pawn, but no more than compensation. Black's doing just fine here. White gets maybe some minor attacking chances, but you can see he's not developed yet, so it's not going to be that bad. And look at that knight there too. So very, very interesting position. I'm sorry, when he gets that back, it'll be even material, but black will have much more development and active pieces, and he'll have 2 center pawns to nothing. On the other hand, like I say, the position's a little bit loose, so it'll be just an interesting game. All right, so that's the b5 thing. I know I went through that fast, but these are old questions that you've already seen, so I didn't want to waste too much time on them because we've got some really good and very complicated new questions. The other one was about this Blumenfeld Gambit, where I kind of winged it, and I think I did a pretty good job of winging it, but still. This is the Blumenfeld Gambit, is to play here. You can go back to earlier shows to see this if you want to see what we said. And I was talking about just accepting the Gambit and then playing this move knight c3 with the idea of e4, because I used to play ideas like this. But since my memory is very bad, I couldn't remember exactly why that was any good, and I was a little worried that after that I'd have to go to the side of the board, and how good was that? Well, I looked at this again, and people have played this, except black's hardly ever played it because it's so good for white. The point is that white's threatening e3, and that's either going to win a pawn or get the queens off and develop all of white's pieces. And there's nothing black can do about it. That's what it amounts to. I may have given some analysis here, but I don't think any serious analysis. Let me just see. Yeah, so I mean, it's just too good. Black would probably just develop a piece, and white would go here, and there's just nothing much to do. If you take that, the queens are going off, and the king's stuck in the center, and I'm attacking c5, and bishop can come to this square, and rook can come here, and it's awful. So that was a good instinct on my part that you can get away with that, and therefore black might play this move. That's the usual Blumenfeld move, but then you play here. And I think we looked at this, so I won't go into a lot of detail, but the idea is this is completely broken up now. There's problems with bishop c4 attacking here. There's always just queen e2 or rook e1 at some point attacking here. This pawn is attacked twice right now, and so that's pretty awful. So you might say, well, why not d4, the natural move, but then e5 is quite strong, forking the 2 pieces. And if you look at this for a while, you'll see there aren't many things to do. And if you take there, which you might think, well, at least I can bail out, but this turns out to be very strong. You end up materially ahead, but positionally way ahead. So that's really bad, actually, that one. Anyway, I just thought I'd show that again because I wasn't really sure. It was one of the chat questions, and I just sort of responded by sort of memory. And I think I was actually pretty right about it, but that's just coincidence. Okay, so let me now go. Let me see first of all about the chat channel. Can you suggest an anti-KID setup? I just want a common playable position without complicated. We actually had this question way back when. I have a list of when the shows were and what questions I answered, so maybe I can go back and fill in some of this stuff. A very good question and a very common one. It's something I get all the time from my students. So we will look at that, and maybe I'll look at it right now because I've got some complicated questions come out that I was sent this week. So let's look at something that's a little, I think this is a little easier to answer because I'm not going to go into tremendous detail. Here's the King's Indian defense. We seem to be looking at it quite a bit. Now, one thing I suggested in that particular show was this move, the Smyslov variation. I think it's very calm. It's positionally sound. I always had a little trouble with it against it as black when I played the King's Indian, so that's kind of a good sign. And the idea is just to get your pieces out, play here, play the knight out, play here. Don't expose your center. You know, the big weakness of the King's Indian is this, whoops, excuse me, is this square here. That's a real problem. You know, that's your weakness. It's not supported by any pawns naturally, and that's why so many black lines have to do with e5 attacking that, c5 attacking that, knight c6 attacking that. That's the issue. And when black succeeds in the King's Indian, it's very often because he breaks down the d4 square. There's also e5 followed by e takes d4, and you can't take back with a pawn. So that's kind of the idea. And of course, this position for white has been played for a million years and is still good, but at least white, there's some disadvantage to playing this way. So this avoids that problem, because if black ever does attack, let me just show you some moves. Now you can play any way you want to. I guess I like playing that first, and then probably this first. You can play moves like queen c2, but I think this first. And if black does try to play for a move like e5, for example, now I like this move queen c2 with the idea of playing rook d1. or maybe castles queenside, usually rook d1. The point I wanted to make, the initial point I wanted to make, is that that can be answered by takes. So you haven't lost that d4 square. That d4 square isn't attacked. And the same thing applies to these kinds of lines where you're attacking this way. You can recapture the pawn. So that's the advantage of the Smyslov system. And what I was showing the other day was, just for example, I think I actually showed bishop d3 here instead of queen c2. Queen c2 is probably a little more accurate, but I think I showed this. Oh, I know. I was going to say usually when somebody plays bishop g5, they play there, don't they? And then in this kind of move, and maybe queen c2 now, or castles. Let's castle. What I wanted to show you was this idea, which is that in this kind of position, you win the two bishops, and it's very often the best thing for black to do when white plays bishop g5, but he's given up that square, which is nice, because it means that you can pile up on that square, and you've got a compensation for losing that bishop pair. And sometimes you even play g4. And sometimes, by the way, you don't castle kingside. You save the idea of castling queenside so that you even have the h-file in a case like this. Probably not good to castle that quickly, actually, because you might want to castle queenside still. Okay, that's very simplified, as I actually explained it better the first time I answered this question. But that's basically the idea. And what else can black do? Well, black can try and play with c5, of course. For example, let's just castle. And white plays here and plays c5. But then you can just play d5, and even though this pawn maybe would rather be here, black's not really in the right position to attack the center properly, in my opinion. And he can't play b5 either, which is nice. So even though black might be equal in this line, there's plenty of play for white. It's very solid. Or you can just develop, which can be kind of irritating for black because it's hard for him to find a plan. Look how solid that center is. It's hard for him to break that down. Now, I'm not going to pretend that white gets an advantage by force in the Smyslov line with bishop g5, but I'm just trying to show you how it can be very easy to play. Get your pieces out. It's sort of traditional chess. You just get your pieces out quickly and have a very safe center. And you have to look carefully at the lines where he chases this down, but actually that tends to help white. So there are other lines for black that are probably more important, but I'm answering this question in general. Now here's an e4 line that I think is useful. And we looked at this twice now, but especially once. Someone asked, actually it was an international master, asked about this line, what to do about this. And we talked about the black point of view. And I pointed out last time and during that time that it's actually a decent weapon for white. Again, very solid. You're going to get your pieces out quickly. A lot of times you can play, if black plays very slowly, you can play a same-ish line where he has made slow moves. But the basic idea is to go here, play bishop here, and castle. And for example, here, and then you also have this move. Now usually black's going to play here, partly because there's no pressure coming from a knight on these squares. And then black has to decide what to do with his pieces, but one thing white has going for him is h4, h5. So for example, if black tries to get this f5, a lot of players are taught to play f5 no matter what. Oh, and another advantage here, by the way, is if black plays one of these moves, let's just say this one, and white develops and black plays here, this pawn's already defended. Usually that's a problem. You have to retreat the knight, or you have to play queen c2 or something like that, but here it's already defended. So in fact, if he had this exact position, he might even just kick the knight. So he's probably going to play a5 first. And anyway, this is an interesting line for white to play. It's very solid. And what I was going to say is one idea that white has is if black immediately tries to get f5 in, like f5, f4, you can sometimes counterattack with this and get a counterattack going. Even here you have, I'm not sure about this exact position. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not quite sure. You might want to play bishop g5 so you don't get cut off first, and then think about h5 next, because otherwise f4 might cut your bishop off. So the exact timing I'm not absolutely sure of. You should be able to play h4 here. Okay, maybe I'll look into this. Even a position like this, where you play like this and play h5, is not easy for black, with the idea of h6 and bishop d3 and maybe bishop out at some point. These are not easy to play. So usually black won't play that way. Black will develop first before he even thinks about f5. And oh, another thing about f5, I know what I should mention. Another thing about f5 is that, so let's just say even we just developed, or maybe bishop e3, but anyway, something like this. This is another little problem, which is this knight h5 move can be a bother, especially with that pawn up there, come to think of it. because you sure don't want to lose your good bishop in the King's Indian, your strongest bishop in the King's Indian. All right, okay, so that's knight e2 is another idea. And those are the two I've shown before as sort of simple, solid systems. And there are probably more, but since this is a chat, I didn't have time to prepare any really, really thorough answer. And thank you for asking that. Fantastic. And we should answer that every week or something because it's so important to players. So never take on f6 if h6 is played. No, don't take because you give up the two bishops, and two bishops are so wonderful in chess. Let me show you that. Yeah, something like this, and he plays h6. Now you want to go back and force him to weaken his king side, because if you take, what you basically find in chess often, especially because you don't have too much of a lead in development, you've only got a one-piece lead in development, is if you don't have an outpost, and if you don't have tremendous space advantage, and you don't have any weaknesses on your opponent doesn't have any weaknesses, and there aren't any here. This is a great pawn structure in terms of no weaknesses. Two bishops is just an advantage in chess, and this advantage can persist all the way to the end game, and it's just not worth it. It's not worth to play against this unless you have an outpost. If you have an outpost, okay. You know, if you have, this is going to be really silly. I'm just going to fake this completely, but if black played here, and white played here, and black played here, and you had this, okay, that's different. Now the two bishops don't mean as much because you've got this incredibly strong square. But without that outpost, I would never take on f6. Okay, so let me see. Okay, any more chats for the moment? Not quite yet. So let me show you something, a question I got from, okay, on my regular email route. That's actually fascinating. It's a little bit technical compared to the ones we've had. We have so many sort of early in the opening questions. This one's a little deeper. This is about, in fact, let me put this up. I'm going to put this up as a game. 383, I think it is. 382. Okay. There we go. Except I don't think this is the right one, wouldn't you know? But let's make sure. Oh yeah, this is the right one. Okay. So the question is about this line. Let me just show you the moves. Okay, now this is the Najdorf variation. Now those of you who are beginners and early on won't know this many moves, but this is one of the most popular lines in all of chess as black against e4, played by Fischer and Kasparov and a lot of other people in the world. And bishop e2, this position is a kind of Sicilian defense, and bishop e2 is one of the moves. It's a positional and slower move, which is still very popular among top players. So black plays here, and there's all kinds of theory involving the fact that this pawn isn't really that weak, and black has other advantages to make up for it. His biggest advantage is he has 2 pawns to 1 in the center, and I won't go any more detailed than that. Some of you, of course, will know this position. Okay, here's the question he's asking about. Is bishop e3 immediately instead of, say, castling or something? And then g4. Now, one thing is black doesn't have to castle, so that's already an issue. Let me kind of take a look at this, what I have here. Oh yeah, I wanted to mention that knight c6 can be played in this move order, because I think g4, because the question is, let me show you what the question is first. The question is, it's that this was very popular for a while, but it's dropped out of top flight chess, this move g4, or this system. Why? And it's a great question, because I looked and looked and looked. I'm not a big Sicilian expert. Of course, I know about these lines, and I do teach some of them, but still. So I looked up a lot of correspondence games and regular games and tried to figure out what was going on here and why isn't this played much. And I think maybe the best answer is it could be played more often. It gives just a complicated position. Maybe people got a little tired of how much it was worked out. But I'm going to show a game with it. This is the game Sheretiuk-Lyubich, which you can see. Oh, you can't see those names. From 2008, actually. Now, he's right that people aren't playing this much recently, and I'm not quite sure why that is. I didn't really figure out why it was. Now, Boligan plays it pretty consistently as white, and Carlsen used it as white to beat Nakamura in a game in 2011. I think, let me show you right away one of the issues, because I might forget to say this later. One of the issues might be that black, instead of castling, it really has a very good score by playing there first. And now I'm not quite sure that white can't play this anyway, but it does look like black's getting to the queen side maybe a little faster. You'll see this position in the game, except with black having castled. And then white might defend this. There's other ways to play it. And then black might play, for example, a move like rook c8 or a5 even. I think a5 would be the main idea. So here, here, and then maybe knight b4 kind of moves. Now we'll see this in the game. The difference is that black hasn't castled, so he might get to the queen side a little faster. Frankly, however, the more I looked at it, I sort of thought probably black's going to castle soon anyway and just transpose. So this is maybe not a convincing reason, but it's maybe a reason in the back of people's mind, something to keep in mind, that maybe knight c6 is a little more accurate in a way. The other thing here is if white plays this move that can be a little irritating in some positions, this move, I think here it's not irritating at all. Here you just play normally. And black covers all these key central squares and has an open f file. And if white plays here now, we probably go here again. Yeah, there was a game with this actually, and white played here, but he wasn't really threatening the d pawn because this was hanging, and that's a little bit superficial to put it that way, but there's also a problem maybe here. This is about equal. It's about an equal position. So maybe knight c6 is one reason, although I'm not that convinced, but that knight c6 is one reason people aren't playing this exact order. In other words, they're not waiting for castles. But anyway, in this game he castled, which has certainly been played more often than knight c6, although it's interesting how often knight c6 is played. So it's not by a landslide that it's played more often, but historically this has been played more often. Now this is a wonderful idea. You're just going to drive away the knight, get a lot of space, and maybe play for checkmate. You're probably going to castle queenside in most lines, and put your rooks over here and just blast away. You know, this is how chess should be played, basically. Okay, so here we are attacking. Now there is a counterattack here that you have to pay some attention to. So you're probably going to play either queen d2 or h4. In this game he played queen d2. Now h4 has been played by some strong players, including Carlsen actually. And the natural move is this, which has been played by some strong players, to kind of come in here. But I'm not so sure it's the best move. I think, having looked at a lot of these games, that maybe you should throw that move in again. Now, white almost never wants to allow you to play a4. That's really a nice move to get in. It gets space, it drives away the bishop, the knight, which has no good squares. So a4 is almost always played. And then knight c6. And then white will probably go back to this plan. There isn't much else to do. You can't even play h5 when this is still hanging. And then black will play here, and that's like the game. I think you'll find this transposes exactly into the game. The move rook g1 has also been played here, but I'm not going to get in a lot of detail. I think all these moves are perfectly good for white, and he gets an interesting, fun game. On the other hand, black maybe is equal, and white tries more ambitious things right now. I'm not sure how sort of normal theory stands. So anyway, in this game he plays this early a5. Once again, knight c6 is played quite a bit, and knight b6 is played. Knight b6 is interesting because you don't commit your knight to c6, you go there. But the thing is that this is what Nakamura played against Carlsen. And Carlsen played this move before castling. And it turns out that just sort of changes everything. He had prepared this variation, and he seemed to stand better the entire game. And unfortunately, because we don't want to use up all our time in our show, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail there. But you can look up the game. Carlsen Nakamura was 2011. I can't remember where. And so, you know, this is high theory. So the people that you haven't played very much might be a little alienated by all these moves, but they're logical and they're worth looking over again. You can always go back to this. You know, the game. This is all put on YouTube after the lecture, after the show. So you can go back and copy the moves down and think about them and think about what the alternatives were. Okay, so anyway, this is what I think. This game indicates what I think is kind of going on, sort of your basic kind of position. And now black plays this move knight b4. So it's an irritating knight. It's close to the king, and and it goes very well with a rook on this file, and also with the idea of playing knight here followed by maybe knight here or something like that. And so the idea is that white isn't the only one with an attack here. On the other hand, white's king is fairly safe. And he still has his plan of just blasting away on the king side, which can be very effective when your opponent doesn't have much space and his pieces are, well, at least the bishop's a little cramped. So also white controls b5 and d5. So that's nice. That means that he's got good control over the center. And also this pawn can be a little weak on d6. It means that this bishop can't roam too much. Or if it does roam, you have to at least consider that queen takes d6 might happen. Okay, so moving on, white plays king b1. I'm not sure if that's the best move, but I'm not going to go into any detail here. The idea is to get off of this problem on the file, and it's a move that you tend to make in the Sicilian anyway when you castle queenside. I really, it may be that there are better moves there. So black plays this other idea that he has in this game, and it's quite a decent one. What he wants to do is counterattack in the center or on the king side, and if white plays captures, which he does, then at least you get an open f file, and this knight becomes a little more active than it was before, which means that the move d5 is suddenly supported by a lot of pieces. A lot of pieces aiming at that d5 square. Now, I wanted to say that I'm looking at this position, and I'm wondering about that move. I think that might be a better way to try to play for an advantage. Now, not that you necessarily get one, but the first idea is if he goes here, he can't really take that pawn because the queen takes d6. So you can just play h4 next, and this position is very comfortable for white. He can switch to playing in the center and the queen side because the king side's closed. That's one thing that can happen here. And but in the game, anyway, he doesn't play f3. What else was I going to say about that? I guess nothing else, but I think f3 was a good move. He plays there. That kind of activates black's pieces. So now I think he should play f4. These decisions are so difficult. I mean, I'm using the computer, too. I'm helped by the computer. That really helps. Because otherwise, black's getting a little bit too much play, and you'll see why. This is such an attractive thing that he plays, such a normal move. One of the ideas here, this is kind of complicated. One of the ideas here is to give up the queen. I think black's already equal here. Now that attacks the queen and the knight, so you pretty much have to go here. And now the bishop is on the knight and the king's exposed, so you have to give up your queen. And this is just one of these crazy things where there's material all over the place hanging. And let me see, I think I gave a few more moves here. Might be worth looking at. Check. Knight better come back. And then I think he just takes the pawn back. Oh, actually check first. Here and then here. And I think this is just sort of dynamically equal. This can go on forever. There's all kinds of forced draws if you play very radically. For example, if white takes this pawn, which might... Oh, first of all, what's the material? 3 pawns, and white has 2 rooks and a piece for a queen and 3 pawns. So I don't know what you think of that. But if he takes another pawn, then this move gets enough initiative that I think black's... It just turns out there's a lot of perpetual checks, and it just turns out to be equal. Crazy line. Anyway, that's a sideline there from the game. So the game didn't go f4. It's such a nice move, rook hg1. Who would imagine that that wasn't a good move? But it turns out kind of oddly. I think white's still in it. Now he threatens to take there. So white might only be just barely worse here. The problem is that now this move is kind of awkward because black's kingside attack is moving pretty fast here. So black's attack on the queen side is moving pretty fast, and white has to retreat. So at this point, white plays this move because he's worried about d5. So he has the bishop protecting that side of the board. Of course, the bishop isn't very well placed on the open file, but it's still the best move. And black plays here, and somehow black's gotten some prospects out of all this. I think just the whole, even though this looks good, it's somehow hasn't worked out that well. He's got a little bit of pressure here now too. Things like rook takes followed by queen takes are possible. And now black plays here. I think probably black needs to immediately simplify. Play here and just take this. Because I think rook g3, he just gets in more and more trouble. Because black gets the move d5 in. And the idea is that probably what white missed is that if takes, this move puts way too much pressure over here. And just for example, if he plays here, this move is good. Remarkably enough, if queen takes, then you're just basically getting mated down here. But pawn takes is just as bad because you're on this square also. So that's too much. So nice little combination. So in this game, let me see. White plays. Let me see what I've got here. Queen d7, rook g3. Oh, he didn't play bishop g5. He played rook g3 here. He tries doubling, natural, right, for the attack. And so now black just has a really good game. He just broke through in the center. He's threatening d4. He has a really nice attack going on here. Now white blundered. Excuse me. This is a correspondence game, so I don't understand what happened here. White played this crazy move here, and black played here, and white resigned. Because after all, the knight's going to move, and then rook takes, and then bishop takes b3. So black's the equivalent of a piece ahead plus an attack. I have no idea how anybody could play bishop e2 here, because it's a correspondence game, and it's by a 2500 correspondence player, which means even higher in regular ratings. A great player, he's done all kinds of good things, but somehow, maybe someone at the chat, maybe the chat has something about this. Do you have any helpful ideas? Yeah, okay. At any rate, that was this game, and it says something about this whole variation, which to me means that white's perfectly able to play it, and so is black. It's just an interesting double-edged position, and I'm wondering if that early knight c6 has something to do with the reason people don't like to play this order for white. Just a thought. Now I have a lot more questions that were sent, but let's see what we've got on the chat here. Let's go back here. Thank you very much. Thank you. If you have more time, do you have any helpful ideas to convert positions where you are a piece up for 1 to 2 pawns in the endgame? Wow. I often struggle in those situations. Yeah, that's tough. That's tough because pawns can advance and they can become queens, and you have to know how to blockade them. I'll think about that for next week and see if I can say something good about it. I think just a lot of practice in blockading pawns and then picking them off. It's just a technique issue. That's a great question, and it's something that students deal with all the time. Try to keep his pieces inactive and not to rush too fast with my own pawns. Well, maybe. It completely depends on the position. Sometimes rushing with your pawns might be the only solution. It's very concrete, and especially if he has a lot of pieces and you have a lot of pieces, then it becomes extremely concrete what you should do. So I'll try and copy that question and get it either next week or the week after. There's the anti-King's Indian setup. Let me see what I've skipped. I don't want to skip too much stuff here. If you have more time, blah, blah, blah. I know. Let me see. I notice IM does what I did for years, having heard he says is. The problem is. Well, you may have to live with that. Yeah, okay. I'll try and catch the next stream. Well, catch this one too. But all these shows are great. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll probably say is forever because I'm getting old and can't teach an old dog new tricks. Certainly it has no problem in terms of the meaning of the position or of what we're really trying to look at here. Okay, let me go to the next question then, because I wanted to get to some of these because people are so nice to send all these questions. This is really a good one, actually. This is from Juan Arias. It was in the chat last week. That's why I didn't get. That's why I didn't get to it. So let me put a game up for this. This is a question about the French defense. I do get a lot of those, but that's only natural because I play the French defense and write about it. So let's see what we've got here. 384. Yes. Okay. The question is, it's another theoretical question. It's got some details in it. So it's a fairly long answer, but it's still very interesting. I think it'll teach people a lot positionally, as hopefully that last example did. Okay, this is the Steinitz variation of the French is coming up. That starts with this move, basically, where you play knight f3 next. This is the classical French, where you play knight f6. Now you counterattack in the center, and white's going to defend that square and cover his center. And black's going to attack here and put a little pressure there. Doesn't look like it now, but a lot of times that pressure on e5 is useful. And white defends that, and these are all standard moves. And here's a specific line that this listener was asking about. It goes like that. That's not the only move by any means. So neither is c takes d4. Maybe I should just say offhand, extremely popular move that, for example, Carlsen played was just to play bishop e7. It may even be the most popular move now. And ask white what he's doing, in a sense, just get castled. Another traditional popular move is this, with the idea of just marching ahead on the queen side. Now recently, in recent times, people have been playing this move quite a lot, this b6 move. And that's a little hard to describe, But it has to do with breaking down the center without having white being able to play that himself. Now when white plays d takes c5, black can play b takes c5. So that's become popular. What am I missing? Well, playing this move first and then playing queen b6 is also very, very critical. Extremely critical. It's been played for years. Bishop c5 is a unique way of playing this, and it has the idea of simplifying on this square usually. So white plays here. Now, if white hadn't played there, black might have strongly considered queen b6, attacking this 3 times and attacking that square. But after white plays this move, if black plays queen b6, then white can just castle, and he's got plenty of pieces on that square. So what black does here, the question is about this position, just simplifying. So white has more space, but black has a nice pawn structure, and he can use the c file, which is a nice open file, and this one is a little bit biting on granite, so he has a nice rook. So this kind of ending has often been okay for black, but you can see that white has more space. He's also got slightly better development. So that's the main idea for black, is just acknowledging that he's trying to get into an endgame. He's trying to just get some pieces off. And the question is not about that move, excuse me. And that's interesting because I have 2 games with this. And maybe I should show the other one first. But we've gotten this far, so it'll go quickly. Yeah, I have a couple games to show, and one of them actually has this move, which I think is an interesting response to this queen b6 move. But the question actually wasn't about that, so I'm going to switch to another game really fast. I'm going to switch to another game, which has the exact same beginning. It's a Carlsen game, as white, and somehow he wins again. Carlsen usually does. So here's the same moves again. I'm going to just whip through those. So there's this double takes and queen b6. Now in this game, Carlsen plays this move and gives up this pawn. It seems like in both cases, black is acknowledging, white is acknowledging that this endgame is going to probably be drawn. I think Nigel Short played this ending against, Korchnoi and I played it against Nigel Short one time, I remember. And I guess it's just traditionally considered that white doesn't have enough pressure for the piece. So here, white is sacrificing a pawn in order to keep the pieces on and get a big lead in development and get an attack. And one thing black can do here is this, and it might be worth, that's the safe move, so it might be worth taking a really quick look with that. Here and here. And what is white going to do in this line? Since the question was about queen d2, I suspect the person is interested in playing the white side of this. And I think the best move here, this is a little bit strange, but black actually has ideas of castling queenside and playing the move d4, or maybe playing knight a4. And those are useful moves. So what white can do here, instead of castling, is play this move queen, oops, let's go back before that, is play this move queen d4, which stops knight a4, or at least discourages it. Well, it does stop because the bishop b5 check for the moment, but it will discourage it in almost any position, because pretty soon white's going to have a rook on d1, and knight a4 will lose a piece or something. And furthermore, it stops the move d4. And I don't know if I want to go into a lot of detail there. Kasparov had this. There are several games with this. And what white did now was very clever. Actually, it's by transposition now. Here, here, h4 was his idea, to play rook h3. But before rook h3, to get space on the king side. So he did play rook h3 once. If you play rook h3 immediately, by the way, you have more cheapos, because you're threatening to play here and then play rook c3. So that's a little trick. But the main line is to go here, because people aren't supposed to fall for tricks like that, so you can't count on them falling on tricks like that. And then black plays this move here, and white came out better in this game. And it's interesting to see a few more moves, because then you can see positionally, you'd think knight e4 would be a really good move for black. For one thing, it has forking ideas, and for another thing, it tries to get into that endgame we were talking about. But take a look at this. White simply plays here now, and this is the reason white is better in a lot of these positions, is that this good knight versus this bad bishop is particularly good. Now notice that if that, you can just go over and check, which is a move you want to make anyway. So the knight's just losing time. So black has one very good piece, but white has more space. White has prospects of playing g4. And since this is Kasparov, let me just keep showing you a few more moves. Not very many, I think. Bishop d7 was played. Check, king a7. Now just bishop d3. He doesn't mind giving up that bishop because he'll be left with a beautiful knight against a bad bishop. So black plays knight here. Here, black maybe comes back again. No, black protects again. And white plays here. And finally black decides, and now the rook can come up and give more pressure. So black decides to try to make some progress, and white just brings the rook back again and has pressure down the e-file. And if black plays here, his bishop is really, really hopeless. White will win a lot of endgames in these positions. So I just wanted to show you that. That's not what happened in the game, but it shows you kind of a way that white can get a typical advantage. So let me get back to the game. There's the game. Queen d2 was played, and black didn't play knight c5. Black said, okay, I'll just take that, which I actually think is critical and probably even best if you know what you're doing. But it's very difficult. White plays this move now with ideas of knight check and knight check. And black played this move, which may be objectively best. Let me just show you. This is why it was nice to leave a little extra time. Let me show you a game, because it's always fun to see games. If black plays the other move that he has to stop this check, if he plays this move, there's this wonderful game. Let me show this to you. Check here. Now black plays well in this game, but white's just got too much attack. Plays here. Black goes back again. He doesn't want this queen b4 move happening. And white breaks with c4. He's just trying to blast open the position because black's king is stuck in the center. Now black is a pawn ahead, by the way, and a fairly solid position, so it's not elemental. It looks like white's got a big attack, but he's got to prove it, because a lot of times in positions sort of like this, it'll turn out the attack dissipates and black gets his pieces out, and after all, white isn't that well developed yet. So, but let me just show you this. d4 is played to sort of block things off. It turns out queen takes d4 isn't a very good move because of queen c1 check. So white instead goes like that. Black goes like this. White attacks the queen. Black goes like this, and then this gets very pretty. Instead of taking this pawn here, he plays check to keep the king in trouble. This is worth looking at because it's just a fun game. King here. Bishop protects the knight. Still a pawn down, but he's obviously making progress because black's not getting his pieces out. Black's thinking about playing f6 kind of moves. White castles, b6, and now white goes back in, knight d6. Just a beautiful 6th rank piece. Black plays here. Black's finally ready to get some pieces out, and if he gets some pieces out, who knows? Maybe play the king up, play f6, he'll be fine. And also right now he's on these kinds of squares. But now white plays a great move. It's is it now? Yeah. Now white plays, and it looks like it's going a little bit better now because black's got attacks on a few pieces, but white has this wonderful move. And the whole game is just really wonderful the way white plays, and black plays pretty well too. And the idea now, of course, is you're on there, so he doesn't have time to take the knight. So I think he plays rook g8. White plays here, attacking the f pawn. And he decides to give that up, because after all, he can give one pawn back, but white very cleverly doesn't bother to exchange queens. He wants to keep things on. And then this move, this attack is just so much fun. It's so thematic. And now c5, blast open more lines. And now the c-file is an issue. Black plays here, good move, threatening checkmate. White defends. Black plays here. White plays back. That's actually the best move, oddly enough. I won't show you why that is, but because we don't want to take all day on this. White goes back this way instead of checking, and because he wants to maintain control of the c-file, for one thing. Black plays here to try and divert the queen, and then takes this. Which he could, no, actually, why that can't be? Oh, because it's pinned, right? So there's no rook c2. And what does white play? White plays here, check, here, queen back to c5, and queen here, threatening rook c1. Black plays bishop c6, rook c1, queen b6. Black's sort of holding on. It's hard to see through all these tactics. It's move 38, and he finds that nice move. opening more lines. The whole game's about opening lines. And now if he takes, which is pretty natural, then that wins. The point being that after this, the queen falls, and after queen takes, of course, rook c4. So one last tactic to justify all this. So he doesn't play b takes a4, he plays rook a c8, trying to give up some material in order to get control of the position, but it turns out that he had missed this move. Right at time control, move 40. So that's very lovely, winning the queen. So I just thought I'd show that game. Anyway, moving back to our game, let's do that. This is the most critical line, is to take here. And since we're getting a little short of time, I'll try to go through this pretty quickly. Check here. Now this is all well-known stuff, and that actually is a new move, I think, at the time. It probably isn't new anymore. It turns out that if white plays this move, which looks absolutely killing because of check here or double check here, it turns out that this move here, in spite of the double checks, leads to some sort of forced draw, and the computer helped all the top players discover that. And so this line has now been given up for white because it just doesn't give enough. But if you wanted a forced draw, I guess you could do it with by playing this way. So he does check, and then he plays this move rook c1. There's a whole bunch of rook d1 may even be the best move, but I'm not gonna go into that. I think black's okay in all these lines if he plays perfectly. This move is a little bit shaky. It turns out that move's interesting, just getting control of the dark squares. And one reason that's interesting is because if white just develops, which is his plan is just to develop, castle, play f5, and kill black. But at least in this case, black can stop white from castling. And having studied this a bit, I think it's just messy is the way to describe this. Maybe even I think black's okay here, actually, oddly enough. Just because his position is so solid and white hasn't castled, it means it's hard to actually break through. I know it looks really good for white, but I think black's actually okay in this position. But certainly white's always at least equal. There's actually a bunch of draws, and there's been a draw that resulted from this. Okay, but that's not what black played. And black might still be okay with b6, but it's very risky. Okay, and black played here, and white doesn't want to exchange queens, so he plays there. And I think black's almost equal now if he just plays this move. White's having a little problem getting a really big attack going because he starts running out of pieces, or he doesn't have enough pieces to really blast his way through. But maybe white's still just a tiny bit better. But instead of that, white plays there, and from now on, I think it's just, the problem is that's just too bad a piece now, and you'll see what happens. And white gets castled, which he didn't get castled in the other lines. Check, over, and now g4. Beautiful, and that takes advantage of that f5 move. So now white all of a sudden is going to have the g file. He's going to be able to break down this and make all those pawns weak. So I'll just show you what happened without going into any detail. Although it's kind of nice what happens next. That move, the last crushing move. Because if he plays here, obviously, he's going to have two passed pawns that are going to be absolutely horrendous. So black has to go by. And then white cleverly does not take the rook. Of course, this is Carlsen, so he knows what he's doing. And decides to just get a checkmating sort of attack instead. He chases the queen away, gets that move in, and the attack is just unstoppable now. So it's kind of clever. It's kind of fun the way this came out. There, I think he gives up here. Yeah, there's nothing left to do, either mate or just simply check and take the rook or something if you have to. So, or probably mate no matter what is my guess pretty soon. Okay, so that's kind of a cool game. Let me see if we've got some other stuff here. Simon Williams seems to be talking about bishop d7, e8, g6, h5. My problem is I feel that I need my light square bishop to defend my e-pawn, though. Yeah, that's a little hard to do without showing concrete things. Again, I'll paste that. It's hard to show, actually. I'd have to show people actual positions, and usually that bishop e8, g6 idea, or the whole idea of the fact of needing your bishop isn't going to start till move, I mean, that issue is not going to come up till move 10 or 12 or something, so I think I'll have to wait on that one. I could just make up a position and show you, but I think It'd probably be better to get to other things. Let me, since we don't, I think I'll go in order though, rather than jump around to other questions that I have from this week and from last week. I think I'll finish this one because I want to show you something white can do. If the question is what white can do, I think you can skip all this nonsense and play a very simple order that I think gives white a tiny advantage and is even still fun to play even in the ending. And here it is. So it's the same line we just looked at. And I mentioned this before, but okay, so all these pieces go off, and black plays this move, threatening to take the queens off or play here. And the cool move is this. I mentioned this. This is really a fun move. It's been played quite a bit by now. And the idea is that if black takes this now, the knight's on an absolutely ideal square, and black still has a horrible bishop. So this, and white's bishop is quite good. So this ending tends to be pretty fun for white. And let's look at this, because black has played this quite a bit anyway, thinking he can draw. And on the top levels, that's basically a draw is okay as black. And now there have been a couple games that white played castles queenside. It turns out this is more accurate, just trying to gain space, as in the position we just looked at with the Kasparov game. So I think this is a very nice move. And black can stop this. But if he doesn't stop that, let's take a real quick look at that. Let's say black goes back here to exchange off. That's black's standard idea, get rid of the best piece on the board. The problem is he's sort of running out of time. Now h6 is really a problem with the dark square, so black stops that. And then white plays, actually he doesn't play that, he plays this first. He allows h6 by playing here first. And white actually saves that knight. He figures he can use it later. And now black stops h6. And white develops, and black plays here. This is worth showing, actually. Just for example, this is worth showing. If black plays here, threatening both this and this, if white's bishop moves, then white can just make a normal centralizing move. And that position always favors white, because that bishop's never getting out, and that knight can never be challenged, not even by a rook on c4. So that's an ending you should get used to, and can come up from a bunch of different openings, actually. And of course a lot of times in the French, but even in other openings. So so anyway, this position favors white, and I see I'm kind of running out of time, so let me see how much of this I should show, if anything else. This was a game between very strong players. White played here now, and black tried to break through in the center, because otherwise white's just at his leisure building up. And I think the easiest thing to do now, white won this fairly easily, but that's a nice way to play. Just to threaten this. I mean, it's obvious, right? But the point is it also helps you because you get g4 in. For example, something like this. The king comes back, and I think g4 right away. And this is tough. Maybe king e7, f7 was a little better, but this is very tough for black. One thing you're threatening to do at some point is you might play here, you might play here to cover that e5 square, and then at some point play there and push with the rook behind it. And then you've got this pass pawn over here and all kinds of open squares, and it's very hard for black to defend, even though there aren't that many pieces left. So that's a nice position. And I might as well just finish the game then, or the main line here. Because what usually happens here is that, blocking off that piece, and then white brings his rook in, and he's going to harass the king side and try and force black to put another piece. Notice that if black puts all these pawns on light squares, he's going to lose a lot of endings because of that bad bishop. So black does the thing I was talking about, tries to get knight c6 in, white stops it, now he tries to get knight c6 in again. White plays here on the 7th rank, and this depends on a particular tactic, and you'll see this. Now black's threatening this knight, so there's no time to take the b pawn. So he just defends that knight. And then he has to defend this because he already has a rook on the 7th, he can't give him an extra pawn. However, now it looks like the rook's trapped, and you can play king d8 next. But white had seen all this and simply plays this move. Black comes back and white plays that move. And that's probably about as far as I'll go, because there's no real way to answer this properly. If you play there, you've got this. Now you've got a pawn for the exchange, and you're about to win the exchange back. And if takes, you do win the exchange back. The best move was the one he played. He played here. And then, I think, did he play that? Yeah. And white played back, just keeping his good knight against the bad bishop. And black played here, threatening the pawn. White simply defended it and stopped b4 also. And white got so black got a rook off. So black's managed to simplify without losing a pawn. But the problem is, let's just look at this for a second. This is really a winning position because not only is the knight overwhelming the bishop, but these pawns are terribly weak too, and they're all on light squares. So, and this is a good thing to practice with, to practice chess with, is how to win this position. But okay, folks, I guess someone came late. That's okay. You're very welcome. Everybody's welcome. And come next week and tell me, give me a question, or chat with everybody else. You don't always have to ask me a question. You can just answer what other people are talking about. So, so thanks everybody, and send me your questions. Remember the email, askIM. Well, actually, which email do I want here? I want askimwatson@chessclub.com. So that's ASKIMWATSON at chessclub.com. Chess Club is one word. That's the ICC. You'll recognize that as their handle or their URL or whatever. And so yeah, send questions there. You can also message me at John L. Watson on ICC if you're an ICC member. So just send me a message. It's usually easier to email because you can frame your questions better and they can take up more space. So thanks very much, and I'll try to get to anything I skipped this week, either next week or the week after. And please tell your friends, tell everybody to watch, and come up with their own questions. It's like a free lesson. That's one way to look at it. You have to pay grandmasters enormous amounts of money and international masters enormous amounts of money to get small amounts of advice in the chess world. So think of it that way. And thank you, everybody. That will be it, and I'll see you next week.